Talkline Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. And now,
you're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
It's always a treat, always a privilege to have former ambassador to Israel, David M. Friedman, who served with distinction during the 4 years of the Trump administration. Mr. Ambassador, good to have you back here, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Zev. Good to be with you.
Thank you. So what is life like now that you're no longer ambassador? What's going on?
Well, I'm busier than ever. I wrote a book in the first 7 or 8 weeks after I left office, which is coming out in February. HarperCollins has the Sledgehammer, How Past Brought Peace to the Middle East, coming out, as I said, in February. February 8th is the release date. You can pre-order on Amazon. I am working on a documentary about the Abraham Accords, which we're almost done filming, which will be aired on the TBN network probably in October or November. And I have a job. I'm working in partnership with the former Secretary of the Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin, to help make money for our investors and continue to grow the relationship between Israel and its neighbors.
No, by the way, you should get accolades for your 4 years of distinction, of service, and of also the Abraham Accords, which is a major, major achievement.
You know, the Abraham Accords was really the culmination of 4 years of work, and what it really did was to prove wrong all the diplomatic elites that said that the only way to make peace was to apologize, if you will, for the U.S. relationship with Israel, to moderate it, to be balanced, to give appropriate credence to the Palestinians, even when they acted in ways in which they didn't deserve it. That was the conventional wisdom. We thought that we should call the balls and strikes, honestly. We felt that Israel was a critical ally of the States. It was very much America's interest as in Israel's interest for us to strengthen that relationship. And you obviously, what we did with Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, and in our proposal for a peace plan. And with all that, the expectation was that there would be an explosion of violence. And of course, the Abraham Accords proved just the opposite. There was an explosion of peace because we made Israel an extraordinarily attractive peace partner for the nations in the region who all wanted to join that circle of trust with the United States. So, yeah, we're very proud of the Abraham Accords, and we view it as part of a continuum of standing with Israel, which we began when, back in January of 2017.
Are you disappointed with the way things are going now because you took away money from UNRWA, which is a terrorist organization? You see money going back to the Palestinian Authority. Iran deal looks like it's almost going to go back on the table. So are you disappointed that all the things that you were able to accomplish, some of it is being rewound by the new administration?
Look, I mean, certainly it's not the way we would have handled things. We think UNRWA is not a solution. UNRWA is a problem. It's a corrupt organization. It perpetuates a myth of millions of refugees that would not fit that definition under any other, generally accepted definition of refugee. We don't think the Palestinians should get money when they're paying terrorists to kill Israelis, and often, by the way, paying terrorists to kill Jewish Americans, because there are so many Americans living in Israel that unfortunately have been victimized in terrorist attacks. It's not. We think that it's a waste of money. It sends the wrong message to the Palestinians that they can get, if you will, without having to give, that they can receive funding without making any effort to alter their malign behavior. We had a policy of accountability. We're happy to help you. We're happy to provide humanitarian aid. We're happy to help you to bring your people to a better place. But you have to join the human race. You have to stop paying terrorists. You have to stop inciting violence. I think the policy is wrong. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I am confident that throwing money at the Palestinians is just about the worst way to bring the region closer to peace. And look, I think it's a lesson that we've learned in the past and we'll learn again. And it's a disappointment, but Israel, I think, will prevail over these bad policies.
Now, by the way, UNRWA, which is I'm on a pet peeve against them because every United Nations agency is meant to reduce the amount of refugees after every conflict. One exception, the Palestinians, where it increases every year. You have UNRWA, which helps perpetuate this whole status. And during the 1967 war, they fought against Israel. They helped Hamas ferry terrorist weapons and terrorists itself. This has been proven. So the fact that they exist, I think, is wrong. And I was glad to see that with you and the Trump administration that they defunded it because this group shouldn't really be in business at all, period.
No, you're 100% right. It shouldn't be in business. Even the Europeans now are starting to realize that the UNRWA textbooks are simply, they're books where they teach math by examples of, if you kill 3 Israelis and then kill another 2 Israelis, how many Israelis have you killed? I mean, that's literally in their textbooks. So no, it's an embarrassment. I think people are starting to realize that. You would have thought that the United States would be ahead of the curve. I think we're actually behind Europe right now in terms of our views on UNRWA. They're misguided, completely wrong.
Now, I know that you have a wonderful relationship with Donald Trump. You worked him prior to you became president. When you became president, you became ambassador. Was it a tough process to convince him to move the embassy to Jerusalem? Because he had a lot of pressure not to move the embassy.
It wasn't so hard. He wanted to do it from the day we got started. Look,
well, there's a story that you were buying land in Israel, and he says, "Why are you buying land there? You can buy cheaper elsewhere, right?"
That was like in 2004 or 5. I mean, that was a long time ago when I was buying an apartment for myself, and we were sitting in a conference room, and he asked me, why are you spending so much money on Jerusalem? Why don't you go to East Hampton or something like that? And I explained to him how precious Jerusalem was to me and to my family. But when I took the job, we talked about what we hoped to accomplish, and moving the embassy to Jerusalem was really at the top of our collective list. We obviously wanted to get buy-in from the entirety of the president's cabinet. So it took us, I think, we recognized Jerusalem in December of 2017. It took about 11 months to get that decision made. There was a lot of opposition inside of the government from the security establishment, the foreign policy establishment. We had a lot of wood to chop to get that done. But the president was never an obstacle. The president was really with me all the way.
But there were people in the administration who opposed it and who voiced their opinion to the president.
Well, look, this was our first year in office. We had a Secretary of State who was against it. We had a Secretary of Defense who was against it. We had a National Security Advisor who was largely against it. So, you're going to give, these are important people. These are serious people. You're going to give them an audience. You're going to give them an opportunity to make their case. And so, it was a process that took about 11 months, but the voices in favor of the move, which were, primarily the Vice President, myself, and Nikki Haley. We had, of course, support from Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt also. But, in the room, it was primarily Vice President Pence and Nikki Haley and me. And I think our case was persuasive because the president agreed.
Now, the president and the prime minister had a wonderful relationship during the 4 years that he was in office. But I've been hearing or reading reports now that the president was disappointed that Bibi recognized the Biden administration when it did.
Yeah, look, I think it was, we were at a time which was extremely sensitive, at a time when the president was still of the view that I guess he remains of the view that the elections weren't fair, and I think he would have preferred that the prime minister hold his powder a little bit longer. My view is that when the United States recognizes a new president, the state of Israel really has no choice but to congratulate the president. That's how democracies work, and that the relationship between Israel and the United States is more important than any particular individual. And whatever the reaction may have been at the time, it's long gone and long disappeared.
Are you still in touch with the president?
I am, not as often as I'd like. I think I was with him about 5 weeks ago as part of a documentary that I'm filming. I went down to Mar-a-Lago and had the benefit of spending about an hour with him on tape discussing the Abraham Accords, and then we spent some time off camera just reminiscing a little bit.
Now, I think there was reported that you didn't expect that he was going to win the presidency when he did. Were you surprised that he didn't win it this time around?
Well, the first time around, I just, it wasn't like I wasn't really all that educated in the probabilities. I just looked at the, if you remember in November of 2016, the New York Times had like a meter that they put out every day, which showed the probability of, Hillary versus Trump. And, even on election day that morning, it was like 95% probability of Hillary. So, I was just kind of going with the conventional wisdom. Obviously, I hoped the president won, and obviously I was elated when he did. 4 years later, I did think he was going to win. I thought that he was the stronger candidate, and I thought that he had done enough, more than enough, in his 4 years, not just with regard to Israel, but with regard to the economy, with regard to national security, with regard to the border, with regard to unemployment. I thought he had done enough to justify being returned to office. So I did think he would win. I was disappointed that he didn't.
What was your biggest challenge in your 4 years as an ambassador?
Well, look, the challenge was always that, I took the job. I was not a diplomat. I had to become a diplomat, but I was never a diplomat in the classical sense. And so I came into office with an agenda. I wanted to strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship. I wanted to do so in Jerusalem, the Golan, Judea and Samaria. I wanted to hold the Palestinians accountable for bad behavior. I wanted to expand Israel's relationships in the Gulf, in the Abraham Accord nations as they developed, and I wanted to do it quickly and in a manner that was that was decisive and unapologetic. Now, I was a member of the State Department, and the State Department is a very large bureaucratic organization. And I was certainly, my views were certainly not endorsed inside the State Department. So when Tillerson was the Secretary of State, it was really challenging because he wasn't of my view either. When Mike Pompeo came in, Mike and I are very dear friends, and we were of one mind, and things changed dramatically then. But the first couple of years of being in office, I had to contend with a State Department that had a lot of baggage, a lot of kind of wooden, inside the box, if you will, views, traditional views that had never borne fruit in past administrations, but they still clung to these views. And so getting through that was a challenge. Now, the way I did get through it was because I had the support of the president. I mean, the only way, if you work in the State Department, the only way you can prevail in a conflict with the State Department is if you have the support of the president. The president's the only human being on earth who outranks the State Department. So my relationship with the president was a godsend in order to move forward with the policies that we wanted to advance.
But it's almost like a different agency, the State Department. It seems like they sometimes do their own thing, independent of the president or his people. It's like a state within a state almost.
Yeah, look, there is a deep state. There are people that have worked there for many, many years, and they see politicians come and go. They are of the view that they know better because this is their career, this is their profession, this is what they know best, and they will wait you out or kind of they'll never say no to they'll never say no if they're subordinate to the decision maker, but they can wait things out. They can run out the clock, so to speak, on an administration, and it's a challenge. And it's been the case for for more than 100 years. I mean, there have been books written by people that came long before I did, that spoke of the challenges they faced in the State Department. It's not that the State Department is is an evil place or a place that acts contrary to what they consider to be the best interests of America. They're good people, but they are entrenched in a very large bureaucracy.
Absolutely. Now, when you dealt with the Palestinians, was there a public and a private side? Because publicly they didn't want you to be part of some of the negotiations. What was it like behind the scenes?
Look, we had back channels with the Palestinians almost at all times. They and in addition, Israel has extremely good contacts with the Palestinians, and we would share with Israel our views. They would share with us their views. So we always knew where the Palestinians were. The problem with the Palestinians is not whether they're willing to talk or not willing to talk, or what's behind the scenes or in front of the scenes. The problem with the Palestinians is that, notwithstanding billions and billions and billions of dollars of aid, notwithstanding being indulged by the entire world and by the United Nations, they haven't succeeded in creating the building blocks for real independence. They don't have a system of justice. They don't have freedoms of speech or the press. They don't respect human rights. They're not willing to live side by side with the Jewish people, and these are foundational failings that they have, and is primarily a function of a very insular and corrupt leadership in the PA, and obviously a radical Muslim extremist terrorist leadership in Hamas.
No question about that. And but I think they were forced to deal with you publicly, weren't they? Because originally they didn't want you to be part of it, and I believe the president wanted you to be part of the negotiation, so they had to at least deal with you for a certain period of time.
They reluctantly met with me. The view was that I had no portfolio with them, because my portfolio was with Israel, and if I were to meet with them, it would somehow suggest that Israel had some hegemony over them. But ultimately they did meet with me. We met from time to time early on. Once we recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, all kind of public diplomatic discussions, at least with me, came to an end. We had back channels, but we didn't do anything. We never met again publicly.
You describe one of the most 50 influential Jews around the world, so which I think is so great. Now, you're watching what's going on today. We're seeing anti-Semitism growing by leaps and bounds in America. We're finding anti-Israel bias. I think we're seeing a resurgence in Iran, because they're going to be getting soon. I believe the deal is going to go back into shape. The JPAC deal is going to continue. America wants to do it so much. You've dealt with the other Arab country regarding Iran. I think isn't that the glue that holds together some of the countries, the Arab countries?
Look. A common enemy is a well-recognized basis for people to coalesce, but it's much more than that. I was in Abu Dhabi about 3 or 4 weeks ago, in Bahrain. I met with the foreign ministers of both countries, and they said something to me which I think is very appropriate. They said, we're all fighting the same enemy. We're fighting the same enemy in America, in the Gulf, in Israel, and elsewhere. We're all fighting extremism. We're fighting it. Now, the extremism can be, take different forms. It can be anywhere from Al Qaeda and ISIS to Hamas to Hezbollah to extreme groups in the United States on the right and the left, to the Iranians and their proxies. But they're all extremists. They all want to elevate. They all want to elevate mayhem, murder, violence, ideological purity over coexistence, and we're all fighting the same fight. And so I think that it's all on the rise. There's lots of different reasons. Somebody will write, somebody will figure this all out one day, but it ranges from, people being stuck indoors for a year and a half to social media and the internet, to the recent war in Gaza. I mean, you could, but at the end of the day, it still comes down to they're about 10 to 15% of the world in all these countries, including our own, are violent, dangerous extremists, and unfortunately, they take up about 80% of the oxygen in the room. They get most of the noise, and it becomes unbearable, and it becomes dangerous. It becomes dangerous to Jewish people in the United States, and it becomes dangerous to people whoever's fighting extremism. They find it becomes a risk of life and death.
Mr. Bass, you mentioned earlier that you're working on improving business ties to UAE and some of the other countries that are part of the Abraham Accords. Could you elaborate what's in the works?
Well, look, there's a huge amount of exchange back and forth. It's there are chambers of commerce being formed. There are investments going back and forth now in healthcare, in technology, in cyber defense, and intelligence cooperation. There's a massive amount of tourism. I mean, unfortunately, I think the UAE had a tough week or two now with COVID, so it's slowed down a little bit. Hopefully, that will restore itself very soon. But there's like 5 or 6 flights a day out of Tel Aviv. Sorry about that.
I think at one point there were like 50,000 people a month going from Israel to Dubai.
Yeah, it was a
crazy number.
A big number, and we were just there and we saw plenty. There's 7 kosher restaurants in Dubai. I was able to open up the Chabad in Abu Dhabi. I was the Baal Tefillah for the first prayer in the Chabad in Abu Dhabi. There's a commissary that's created by in the airport by the Emirates Air hangar called Kosher Arabia. That's going to be maybe at least the second, maybe the first largest purveyor of kosher airline food in the world. Look, in the Emirates, I know that in Abu Dhabi, the government put out a requirement that every hotel must offer kosher food to its guests. I told this to the president. He found this extremely amusing. That I told him, I said, it's easier for me to get a kosher sandwich in Abu Dhabi than in Washington, D.C.
There's only one kosherette. That's amazing, right?
It's amazing, yeah. And the president thought it was amazing, too. So, look, you pointed out Iran. Of course, Iran is a threat to the UAE. It's a threat to Saudi Arabia. It's a threat to Bahrain. It's a threat to Israel. And, of course, having a common enemy is important. But right now, the relationship is growing in ways that are way additive, incremental to the security issues.
Which it should continue to grow, and I think there'll be a lot of business connection. A lot of Jews, not just in Israel but around the world, want to go to Dubai, so that's only going to grow. Your book was going to be out soon. Is going to be made into a movie as well?
No, the book. No, so the book is the book. The book is my story, the story of my 4 years in office, and how we sort of the inside story about how we were able to achieve so much in terms of strengthening the relationship between the U.S. and Israel. It gives a little bit of an insight into the challenges we face, the challenges in the State Department, how the government works, some of the president's courage in getting these things done. So that's the book. The movie is really a documentary. What I wanted to do was to really document the Abraham Accords from the perspective of the people who really were part of it. So, before, my concern was that before everybody scatters to the wind and goes and does something else, I want everyone who was involved to really speak. So I went down to Florida. I interviewed Jared Kushner. I went to Mar-a-Lago, interviewed the president. I went up to Washington, spoke with Mike Pompeo and Mike Pence, and Yusuf Al-Taiba, who is the Emirati ambassador to the United States. We then went across to Israel and spoke with with the prime minister and the defense minister and the foreign minister. Then we went off to Abu Dhabi and Dubai and to Bahrain and Morocco. And so we're just kind of trying to tell the story from the perspective of the people who are involved, and obviously, add to it a lot of perspectives from people on the street. We spoke to some of the new businesses that had formed in light of the Abraham Accords, some of the kosher restaurants. We tried to give people a full understanding. It's going to be about a 4 or 5 hour documentary. It'll air in 1 hour segments. Should be out in the fall.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's an important addition to the history of the of our 4 years in office.
People can pre-order the book. The name of the book and how can people find it?
So the name of the book again is it's too soon to get it because it's not out yet. But it's called Sledgehammer. How Breaking with the Past Made Peace in the Middle East. It is on Amazon right now, but it's on only for pre-order. And if you go on pre-order, you'll see it's not available until February the 8th. So by all means, if people would like to pre-order it, they should. But they are guaranteed the lowest price whenever it ships. But it won't be out till February the 8th.
So we have to have you back again before, and so we'll look forward to
with pleasure.
With pleasure. And I want to thank you for your dedication, for your service, because what you did, major accomplishments, which people didn't think could happen, but it did under your watch and working together with the president and working with the team. So thank you for what you've done, and look forward to having you back.
Thank you, Zev. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to coming back.
Look forward. Ambassador David Friedman, one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Talkline Radio and TV with Zev Brenner is just phenomenal. Everybody concerned about the Jewish community should listen and watch. He has the best guests. He asks the most interesting questions. He's always so well prepared. It's talk radio and television from a Jewish point of view at its very best.
To advertise on the Talkline network and Talkline's email and social media blasts reaching over 70,000 people, please call 212-769-1925, extension 100. That's 212-769-1925, extension 100. Or email info@talklinenetwork.com.
Thank you for listening to today's episode.
Thanks for listening.
For continuous Jewish programs, talklinenetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.